I go to a public university in California, part of the UC system. Now, if you know anything about the UCs, you know there's a big difference between schools like UCLA, Berkeley, and UC Santa Barbara, which are massive, and the smaller campuses like mine. The bigger schools each have their own version of what people call a dedicated tour day, where all the incoming freshmen come to visit campus. But honestly, that's just the official version. In reality, it's a full blown all day party event for the current students. Berkeley has Cal Day, Santa Barbara has Deltopia. Those are probably the two biggest ones. My campus sits about 2.5 hours north of Santa Barbara. Not exactly next door, but close enough that it's pretty common for students from other schools to make the drive down for the festivities. That was never my thing, though. I've never really been a party hard type of person, so I always skipped it. But then I realized something. It was senior year, my last shot. So when my friends asked me if I wanted to drive down to Isla Vista for Deltopia, I figured, you know what? Forget it. Let's go. We left that Friday afternoon, the day before things really kicked off. The car was completely packed. Hunter was driving. Joining us were my buddies Damon, Benjamin, and Arman. All five of us are over 6 feet tall, so the ride was not exactly comfortable. But good music and good conversation made the 2+ hours go by fast. When we got to Isla Vista, we spent nearly an hour just trying to find parking. And I'm not exaggerating. That's how insane Deltopia weekend is. We were close to giving up when Hunter, being the smooth talker he is, managed to charm a sorority girl into letting us use her designated spot. We all got a good laugh out of that one. Hunter's sister is a junior at UCSB, and she'd agreed ahead of time to let all five of us crash on the floor of her apartment. That might sound rough, but during Deltopia, having any guaranteed place to sleep is basically a golden ticket. Her and her roommates were super laid back, so we ended up pre-gaming with them that Friday night, even though Deltopia itself didn't technically start until Saturday morning. Now, there's one more thing I need to mention before we get to the actual story. Hunter is one of those guys who knows everybody. Super outgoing, super likable, and because of that, a lot of people kind of orbit around him. One of those people is a guy named Amir. I'm using the word friend pretty loosely there. Amir is the type of guy who latches onto social circles without ever really being invited into them. He's loud, insecure, completely unaware of how he comes across, and somehow always manages to make every single conversation about himself. And before you say anything, I'm not just venting. Amir has done some genuinely messed up stuff to me and my friends in the past, so I think I've earned the right to give you that background. Amir had mentioned to Hunter at some point that he was also heading to Deltopia that weekend. There was never any real conversation about where he'd be staying or whether he'd be linking up with us. He wasn't part of our group trip. Nobody brought him up on the drive down. About an hour after we got settled into Hunter's sister's place, the five of us headed out to make a liquor run. On the way back, as we were leaving the store with everything we'd bought, I looked up, and there was Amir, just standing there on the curb, hands in his pockets, like he'd been waiting for us. Nobody said anything. We just kept walking toward the apartment, and he kind of silently fell in step with the group, like he'd been with us the whole time. The first thing out of his mouth, once we were a few blocks away from the store, was, "Why are you guys acting so surprised to see me?" Was this guy serious? Of course we were surprised. There was no plan to meet up with him. Nobody had told him where we were staying, and as far as we knew, Hunter hadn't even shared that information with him. We mostly ignored him and kept walking, not really sure how this was going to play out. Things escalated pretty quickly once we got back to the apartment. Amir asked if he could use the bathroom, and Hunter, reluctantly, said fine. But instead of waiting, Amir sprinted ahead of the group, and by the time Hunter's sister answered the door, Amir had already stepped past her, saying, "I'm staying here." She didn't know who he was. She just assumed he was part of our crew. When Hunter figured out what Amir had pulled on his sister, he was livid. I won't go into every detail of the argument that followed, but here's the short version. Hunter told him straight up that he had to leave, that he wasn't welcome, and that lying his way past his sister was crossing a serious line. Amir didn't go quietly. He stood outside the door for another 20 minutes trying to argue his way back in. But Hunter's not the guy you want to test. Eventually, Amir took the hint and left. We got pretty wasted after that, and honestly, Amir was all any of us could talk about for the rest of the night. We pieced together later that Hunter had his iPhone location shared with Amir, meaning Amir had literally used that to track us to the apartment. Anyway, the next day, Deltopia itself was an absolute blast. Completely lived up to the hype. Things wound down by late afternoon, and we met up with 5 other friends and all headed back to the apartment to hang out. 10 of us total. We filled the others in on the whole Amir situation, and they were just as weirded out by it as we were. One of the guys, Ryland, mentioned he was pretty sure he still had Amir's location on his phone. He checked it, and his jaw literally dropped. He turned the screen toward us, and the little blue dot was sitting almost exactly on top of where we were. The second we said something about it out loud, the dot started moving. Fast. Like Amir had been sitting in a car nearby and had just floored it out of there. That was unsettling, borderline obsessive, especially after Hunter had made it very clear that Amir wasn't welcome. We probably should have taken it more seriously than we did. Instead, we laughed it off and kept partying. That night, after everyone had crashed, I woke up randomly, well past midnight. I barely had time to figure out where I was when I heard it, glass shattering, somewhere deeper in the apartment. I sat up and looked around. Nobody else had moved. Everybody had gone to sleep wasted, and I was pretty sure I was the only one who'd heard it. I didn't have anything I could use as a weapon, so I grabbed an empty wine bottle off the floor, took a breath, and started moving toward the sound. When I got to the living room, the sliding door to the balcony had been completely shattered. A large rock was sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by broken glass. I didn't need to think twice about who was responsible. I turned to go wake my friends up, and that's when I caught it out of the corner of my eye. The handle of the hallway closet door, moving, just slightly, like someone on the other side had grabbed it. I froze. The idea that Amir might actually be inside that apartment, that was a different level of terrifying. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to rip the door open. But something stopped me. I backed off, slipped into the bedroom, and shook Hunter awake. The two of us walked back to the living room together. By the time we got there, the closet door was wide open. Hunter reached inside and pulled out a large kitchen knife. I just stood there. Amir had been standing behind that door with a knife in his hand. Had I yanked that door open by myself, I don't know what would have happened. That was the most terrifying moment of my life. We woke the entire house up, swept every room, and called the police. The officers came out, took a report, and told us property destruction is unfortunately common during Deltopia weekend. Without more evidence directly tying Amir to it, there wasn't much they could do. Amir had also stopped sharing his location with Ryland at that point, so we couldn't even show them that. We had to leave the next morning. Hunter was sick with worry about leaving his sister and her roommates there, knowing what had happened. Before we got in the car, he typed out a long message to Amir. I'll let you imagine what it said. It never delivered. Amir had already blocked him. We all checked. He'd blocked every single one of us. In the weeks after, none of us heard a word from him. He just vanished. And honestly, I still haven't fully wrapped my head around all of it. Amir has always been the type to talk big but not actually follow through. He's never had a history of violence. If anything, I always thought of him as kind of passive. But that night told a different story. He knows where we all live, and I'd be lying if I said that doesn't still bother me. I'll post an update if anything happens.